I also kind of operate from the standpoint that any idea can be a good idea until you test it, then you'll figure out if it's good or not. But the reality is you can't test every idea. And there are ideas that are better than others. Knowing that, it means that you have to find a way to separate what's a good idea from a bad idea. And sometimes you could have a great idea that will lead to no revenue impact. So you have to be able to kind of separate that. I think there's obviously some methods like the ICE framework, right? Impact, confidence, effort, that a lot of people can use to just quickly prioritize, experiment. I think the problem with a lot of those frameworks as well is that they are still pretty subjective, right? Like if I tell you, okay, you got a score, how much impact do you think this test will have from a scale from 1 to 10? How much do I think it will have? Like that could vary from people to people. It's heavily prone to biases. Okay, what's your confidence that it will have that impact? Again, it's very subjective. It's also very biased from person to person. And then effort is maybe a little bit more accurate, but even then, right, like if you truly don't understand effort for development and design, maybe that's still subjective. But impact and confidence, which essentially is most of the score, it's better than nothing, but it's also not foolproof. And I will say there's no prioritization method that is absolutely foolproof. But I think we need to look a little deeper and remove some of the biases that can come with a specific person deciding what's going to be the impact or confidence. Obviously, like if something is your idea and you think it's worth it, you're just going to score it higher than someone else that you're arguing with that doesn't really believe in that idea. So how do we democratize that and kind of think about a test idea more objectively? I look at a couple things. First and foremost, right, I want to understand impact. What does that mean for a test to have an impact? What needs to happen for this test to have an impact? I'm not talking necessarily about like, do I need a 5% lift or a 10% lift? I'm trying to understand, okay, I'm getting, let's say, 1 million visitors a month on my website. Is this test impacting all 1 million visitors? Is it only impacting 1%? Is it impacting even less than that? How many people are going to see this? Is it in a flow that, is critical to a purchase? Yes or no? What I will want to do first and foremost is I want to prioritize tests that will be in my purchasing journey. If I'm testing something in checkout, I know that every single person that tries to buy on my website will have to go through the checkout flow. Therefore, right, if I can increase, checkout performance by, 1 or 2%, I know that this impacts everybody that's about to make a purchase late in the funnel. So I know that it's going to have a great impact. It's going to be seen by everyone that's about to make a purchase. Something like that, testing something in a key area of the funnel where on a direct path to purchase, or testing something that is going to be impacting a lot of my traffic. That is, I think, the best way to think about impact. The second thing is, this is slightly more advanced, right? But one of the things that we do internally at SplitBase is we also calculate what is the minimal detectable effect, right? What's the minimum effect that I need to be able to reach? What's the minimum uplift I need to get for this test to be statistically valid? So that's something that you can calculate beforehand. And then what I want to figure out is, let's say I'm able to increase conversions by 3% with this test. How much additional revenue will it generate? Now, if that number is very, very small, couple $100, I probably won't spend more worth in time and effort, to launch a test that will only generate me a couple $100. But if I calculate that this test, lifting conversions by 3% or adds to cart by 4% will give me an extra $25,000 a month, well, then I was actually able to put a dollar value to this potential win. And now, this is a bet. And I think it's a good idea to treat your experiments as bets. You're betting that, okay, this will generate something. Well, obviously, before you make a bet, you want to know, how much could this bet be worth to you? Being able to calculate the potential impact of a test is also a really great way. Now, we have our own scoring methodology at SplitBase. We call it the impact framework, and it actually goes through, this dollar value calculation. We also look at, yes, what percentage of people does it impact? But I think beyond that as well is, does this test actually help me with my quarterly goals, right? Like companies have often big objectives. Let's say, we've got this company where like their number one objective is increasing subscription. If that's the number one objective and everybody's being held accountable to that, I will probably want to prioritize experiments that also, as kind of one of its main KPIs, focuses on increasing subscriptions. I probably want to do that before something else. Now, when you kind of combine all those factors, right, this is where you can have slightly more solid prioritization. At the end of the day, will this test actually impact enough people to, make me more money? How much more money could this test generate me? And is it worth it if it wins? Then is it aligned with my company's goals and objectives? And then at the end of the day, right, I think there's still like more granular things that we can look at, but that can be a bit more subjective. And I don't think we need to get into it right now, but generally, for example, okay, well, if we're introducing a whole new concept, something that doesn't exist, new content that's never been on this page before, or are we changing customer behavior, or we're just moving something around that may not bring new information or does not change behaviors, right? The more you change behaviors, the more there's a potential for an impact, positive or negative. The less you change behaviors, the less you may see an impact. So that can also be factored in, right? And of course, then effort, right? At the end of the day, when you kind of know that bet that you're making and you kind of have an understanding of what's the potential of an impact this test might have, right? Like, okay, how much effort does it take to actually build this test? If something, is worth $3,000 if it wins, but it takes 3 months to build, I don't think it's worth spending 3 months of your team's time to design and develop this test, this massive new flow maybe for whatever thing you're trying to do, for a very minimal impact. I don't recommend necessarily just always going for the easiest and simple tests. And sometimes the experimentation frameworks also biases and prioritize higher the tests that are easiest to run. I don't think that's necessarily good in the sense that some tests requires a lot of effort, but they're incredibly worth running. Then there are some tests that requires very low effort, but they have no potential impact, so they shouldn't be run either. So I think it needs to be balanced. There needs to be a good understanding of what type of effort is going to be required to launch a specific test, and that needs to be balanced with the potential impact of a test. And when you kind of reach that balance, that's a test that's worth running.